The Flames of War. 1. Karn Village. It's a village belonging to the Re-Estais Kingdom, founded about 100 years ago by a pioneer named Thomas Karn. The village is situated at the edge of the Great Forest of Tob, which spreads across the southern base of the Azerlesia Mountains, a range that serves as the boundary between the empire and the kingdom. With a population of roughly 120 people from 25 families, it's a size that is not particularly unusual within the kingdom. The fortified city of Rantel is about 50 kilometers away, a 2-day journey on foot. The village's main sources of production are agricultural crops and blessings from the forest. Aside from merchants who come to buy medicinal herbs about 3 times a year, the only other visitor is a tax collector who arrives once a year. It's a typical small village in the kingdom where almost no one passes through, and time itself seems to have stopped. Henri Emot had lived as a member of this village for 16 years. Her mornings started early. She would usually get up with the sun, which was not an uncommon sight in a village that lacked the magical lights of a big city. Her first task was to draw water from the well near her home. Drawing water was a woman's job. She would fill the large earthenware jars in the house, completing her first chore. By then, her mother would have finished preparing breakfast, and the 4 family members would eat together. Breakfast consisted of oatmeal made from barley or wheat, stir-fried vegetables, and sometimes dried fruit. Afterward, she would go to the fields with her father and mother. Her 12-year-old sister would go to the forest to gather firewood or help with farm work. Around noon, when the bell in the village square rang, they would take a break for lunch. Lunch was black bread baked a few days before and soup with scraps of dried meat. Then it was back to work in the fields. When the sky began to turn red, they would return home to prepare dinner. Dinner was the same black bread as lunch, along with the bean soup. Occasionally, if a hunter had caught an animal, they would get a share of the meat. By the light of the hearth, the family would chat and work, perhaps mending clothes. They would go to bed around 6 p.m. These were her days. She thought this life would continue on forever. On that particular day, Henri woke up as usual and went to the well to draw water. She drew the water and poured it into a small jar. It took about 3 trips to fill the large jars at home. "Heave-ho," she said. Henri rolled up her sleeves and lifted the jar. With water in it, it became quite heavy, but it was easy for her to carry now. She wondered if a slightly larger jar would reduce the number of trips and make her work easier, as she made her way back home. Then she thought she heard something and turned her head. Something brewed in her chest, as if the air itself was boiling. The sound of something made of wood being smashed. And then, a scream. It was not like a bird being strangled, it was something entirely different. A cold shiver ran down Henri's spine. "I can't believe it. It's my imagination, a mistake." Words of denial were born, only to fizzle away. She frantically began to run. Her house was in the direction of the scream. She threw the jar aside. She couldn't carry something so heavy. Her long skirt tangled around her legs and she nearly fell, but she was lucky to keep her balance and run. The voice came again. Henri's heart pounded wildly. It was a scream. There was no mistaking it. She ran and ran and ran. She couldn't remember ever running this fast. She ran at a speed that made her legs stumble, almost causing her to fall. The neighing of horses, the screams of people, shouts. They grew louder. In the distance, Henri saw a man in armor swinging a sword at a villager. The villager screamed and collapsed. A sword was then plunged into them, as if to finish them off. Mr. Morger. There were no strangers in such a small village. She knew the person who had just been killed. He was a bit loud but good-natured. He was not a person who deserved to be killed like that. She was about to stop, but instead she gritted her teeth and put more power into her legs. The distance that had not seemed far at all when she was carrying water now felt incredibly long. Shouts and curses began to become audible. Amidst the chaos, her house finally came into view. "Father, Mother, Nemu." She screamed her family's names as she flung open the door. Inside were her 3 family members, their faces filled with fear, holding small pouches. As soon as Henri entered, their faces instantly changed, and a look of relief washed over them. "Henri, you're safe." Her father's hands, hardened from farm work, held her in a tight embrace. "Oh, Henry." Her mother's warm hands also hugged her. "Come on, Henry's here. Let's hurry and escape." The Emmett family situation was dire. Because they were worried about Henri, they were afraid of missing her and hadn't been able to leave the house. They couldn't abandon a family member who might or might not return. Because they had lost valuable time to escape, danger must have been very close now. Just as the family was about to run out, a shadow appeared in the doorway. Standing with the sunlight at his back was a knight completely covered in full plate armor. On his chest was the emblem of the Baharith Empire. In his hand was a drawn blade, a long sword. The Baharith Empire, the neighboring country to the Re-Eastais kingdom that occasionally waged wars of invasion. However, those wars centered around the fortified city of Arantel and had never reached this village. But had their peace finally been shattered? Through the gap in his helmet, a cold, icy gaze seemed to be counting them. Henri felt his unpleasant, lingering stare. The sound of metal creaking on the gauntlet told her that the knight was tightening his grip on his sword. And just as he was about to enter the house, "Wah! Gah!" her father tackled the knight. They stumbled outside, grappling with each other on the ground. "Go now, you bastard!" A thin trickle of blood stained her father's face. He must have been cut somewhere when he charged. The father and the knight rolled on the ground, struggling with each other. The knight held back the father's knife with one hand, while the father held back the knight's short sword with the other. Witnessing her family's blood, Henri's mind went completely blank. Should I help my father, or should I run? "Henri, Nemu!" Her mother's scream brought her back to her senses. Her mother shook her head with a pained expression. Henri grabbed her sister's hand and took off running. She wanted to look back, but she couldn't. She had to run to escape into the great forest as fast as she could. The neighing of horses, screams, angry shouts, and the clanging of metal, and the smell of something burning. Sounds and smells reached her ears, her nose, and her eyes from all over the village. She ran, desperately trying to figure out where they were coming from. When she was in an open space, she hunched down. She ran, trying to stay hidden in the shadows of the houses. A bone-chilling terror. Her heart was not pounding just from the running. Yet, what kept her moving was the small hand in her own, her sister's life. Her mother, who had been running slightly ahead, froze as she was about to turn a corner, then suddenly backed away. She gestured behind her with her hands, telling them to go the other way. The moment Henri understood the reason, she bit her lip, stifling a sob that threatened to escape. She gripped her sister's hand and ran, trying to get away from that spot. She didn't want to see what was about to happen. The edge of the village was getting closer. As Henri ran, she heard a loud, rhythmic clanging behind her. With a prayerful heart, she glanced back for a moment. Just as she expected, as she had feared, a single knight was running after them. So close. She desperately tried to hold back a curse. She had no energy for that. She gasped for breath, feeling as if she was about to collapse from exhaustion. If she were alone, she wouldn't have been able to run anymore. The presence of her sister, whom she was almost pulling along, was what gave her strength. She glanced back again as she ran. The distance between them had hardly changed. Even in his armor, the knight's speed showed no sign of slowing down. Her sweat turned cold, and a shiver ran through her body. At this rate, she wouldn't be able to escape with her sister. "Let go of her hand." A voice echoed in Henri's mind. "You might be able to escape alone. Do you want to die here? Maybe it would be safer if you each ran separately." "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" Henri whispered, grinding her teeth. She tightened her grip on her sister's hand. What a terrible thought for a sister to have. "Hurry, let's go." "Oh, okay." Why wasn't her sister, with her faith about to cry, actually crying? It was simple, because she believed in Henri. She believed that her big sister would find a way. As if the large strides Henri was taking had finally caught up, her sister lost her balance. Henri was pulled off kilter as well. "Get up, quick! Okay!" But the time lost was significant. Henri heard the clink of chainmail right beside her. The knight stood there, slightly out of breath. The sword in his hand was wet with blood. Not only that, but there were spatters of blood on his armor and helmet. Henri shielded her sister behind her and glared at the knight. "If you don't resist, you will die without suffering." There was no kindness in his voice, just a sneering tone. It was a slick, contemptuous way of saying he could kill her instantly if she tried to run. Henri's chest burned. What is this guy saying? The knight, seeing that Henri had stopped moving, slowly raised the sword in his hand. Before the blade, raised for a downward strike, could slice her. "Don't you dare underestimate me!" Gah! Henri delivered a powerful punch to his iron helmet. She put all the anger that filled her body and her desire to protect her sister into her fist. She felt no fear in striking the metal. It was a full power blow. She heard a sound like bones cracking from inside her body, and a moment later, a sharp pain shot through her. The knight staggered from the impact of the punch. "Hurry!" "Okay." She tried to run, enduring the pain, and felt a searing sensation on her back. "Gah! You bastard!" The humiliation of being punched in the face by a little girl he had underestimated made the knight lose his composure. Henri had been saved because the knight lost his cool and simply swung his sword at her as she was trying to escape. She wouldn't have that luck again. Henri was wounded, and the knight was enraged. There was no way Henri would be saved now. Henri fully understood. The chance of escaping, even if they reached the great forest, was slim. There was still some distance to go. She couldn't possibly outrun a knight who was likely on horseback. She could try to return to the house and hide in the cellar, but they wouldn't let her get away with something so naive. Still, she didn't want to die, and above all, she was entrusted with her sister's life. She would protect her even if it cost her her own. The heat and intense pain in her back intensified with every beat of her heart. Something warm and wet was running down her back, but she could still run. Henri gritted her teeth and tried to get away from the knight. And then she saw despair. There was darkness. It was the embodiment of death, a being that could never be defeated. It was cloaked in robes blacker than the darkest shadows, as if it had spilled from another realm along with the darkness. Its face resembled a skull with almost no flesh. In its hollow eye sockets flickered a murky, flame-like red glow, watching its prey with a cold gaze. In one hand, it held a staff that was both divine and terrifyingly beautiful, as if it were an amalgamation of all the beauty in the world. The air froze. Time itself seemed to have stopped in the face of this absolute being. For a moment, Henri forgot to breathe. She and her sister were going to be killed. This was the harbinger of the next world, appearing only to her. That was what Henri thought, until the knight behind her stopped moving. Gasp! A sound escaped him that wasn't quite a scream. Whose gasp was it? It sounded like her own, like her sister's who was trembling all over, and like the knight's behind her. She no longer felt any pain. In fact, she felt nothing but terror. Slowly, a bony finger with no flesh on it extended and a hand spread as if to grasp something. It passed Henri and was pointed at the knight. She wanted to look away, but she was too scared to. She felt as if looking away would make it transform into something even more terrifying. Hi-ya! The clanging of metal and a scream combined into a grating sound. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like it was about to stop. Grasp heart. The moment the embodiment of death made a grasping motion, a loud metallic crash sounded behind Henri. She was scared to look away from death, but a tiny bit of curiosity won out. She glanced back and saw the knight lying face down on the ground. He was no longer moving. He was dead. Yes, he was dead. The danger that had been pursuing Henri had vanished from the world with a simplicity that was almost laughable. But she couldn't rejoice, because death had only changed form and become even more concentrated. Death began to move toward Henri. The darkness in her vision grew larger. A thought crossed her mind that it would swallow her whole. Henri hugged her sister tightly. Running was no longer an option. If it were a person, she might have had a faint glimmer of hope. But the being in front of her was one that could easily extinguish such hope. She could only pray to die quickly and painlessly. Her sister clung to her waist, trembling with fear. Henri wanted to save her, but she couldn't. She could only apologize for her helplessness. At least by dying together, her sister wouldn't be lonely. And then, Henri let out a foolish sound. Death had walked right past her.